to the United States of America podcast. I'm your host, Niti, and we are broadcasting live from the Food Church here on North Carolina. If you've missed past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and watch the rest like a documentary. We are a people at peace, and we have declared peace to all the nations around the world. This is not a marketing or promotional channel, and we are shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you. We are sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Be kind and self-govern. If you have questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I am joined on air with Ohio Chairwoman Lisa Schaefer. Good morning, Lisa.
That's all right. I've been called that before.
Oh,
hey, good to hear you too. So it's all right.
Oh, whoa, what's happening over here? We're having some technical difficulties. Sorry. Friends, Anna has not slept in 3 days. And so we are allowing her grace. If she happens to jump in, then great. And if she needs to get some more sleep, then we figured we could just come on and start sharing with you some information that we know about the 4 pillars. And Lisa, you teach classes. So I think that, you are definitely qualified to be able to at least help everyone who's here, because we're talking to YouTube. We're talking to people who have no idea what's going on. They may never have heard of this before. So, what in the world is going on? What's happening? Are the Americans back?
The Americans never left. We've always been here. We just haven't necessarily been awake and realizing who we were. And so now that we are, and we're starting to begin to assemble, which, interestingly enough, in the beginnings of our country, in our colonies that were being formed, there were many assemblies. They were church assemblies, they were neighborhood assemblies, they were township assemblies, and eventually those blended into county assemblies. And then those county assemblies went on to form our state borders and form states as they began to move through the Revolutionary War and emerge out on the other side into an organized form of government. We've had this conversation a little bit with Anna before about, in the last time we talked, I had asked her about, well, where did the 4 pillars come from? And I kind of laughed because I said, it's really sort of 3 pillars and an architrave, meaning the lintels that go over the top of the columns that unify all of the pillars, right? And so, every government on the earth has to have those 4 elements. They have to have their General Assembly or their Senates. They have to have their court system. They have to have a militia for their defense. And they have to have a way to do business with other governments. And so, we've done that on our assemblies and are starting across all of our states to unify that, so that as those states begin to put in place each of those different elements of government, that we're beginning to get to the point where we can form back our full American government. We were always meant to have 2 governments. Shocking, I know, but it's true, okay? We were meant to have the people's government, the we the people part of it, okay? And all the people that are running around that are U.S. citizen going, we the people, we the people. Well, you're right, with the exception of you're on the wrong side of the fence, okay? And what you want to be is you want to be the American that says we the people. And that takes a status correction right there, okay? And then we have what our contracted services are. Because originally, after 1787, they realized we didn't have a navy to defend our borders. And the French were starting to really push up from from Florida and from Louisiana, and we needed to have some defense around our shorelines, to keep them from coming in and starting battle on our American states. And so we contracted. And who had the biggest navy at the time? Who had the power, the firepower? Guess who? It was Britain. It was the English. And so that was all they needed to slide in that back door and begin to work to undermine our American government. And they did it under contract. And eventually they made sure that they undermined our government, and the government of we the people was lost in history for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you go back through the history books, it's not there.
I mean, well, they burned a lot of the books, and they continue to burn books, and then the records. Also, there's also they've created a lot of stories about, and the timeline. They've changed the timelines, and if you notice in school, Lisa, one of the things that I realized that helped me to comprehend a little bit more and receive what was being shared was that we were never taught history on any kind of timeline. And when I started if you're a child and you're in school and you're supposed to remember 1800 something, 1700 something, 1500 whatever, like someone's just telling you random events with random dates, it really doesn't mean anything to you. You're a child, you're just trying to do what you have to do in school, and you don't see the bigger picture. But when, as an adult now, if I try to go put the timeline back together and say, wait a minute, when did this happen? And one of the things I thought was most fascinating, Lisa, was that Abraham Lincoln was alive at the same time as some of our, just a couple of our forefathers, like of our revolutionary founding fathers.
Right?
Well, just that one fact was enough for me to know that everything's a fraud, because they wanted us to believe that we fought this Revolutionary War, we became America, whatever happened. And then there was this Civil War like 400 years later, after we had enslaved all the Black people for so long. I mean, like, it was kind of like this was just this blanket story that we were told. And then you're like, wait a minute. He was alive at the same time? Wait, what? What?
Have you actually ever read the real Grimm's fairy tales? The
No,
actual Grimm's fairy tales?
never heard of
Well,
that, actually, Lisa.
most most every Disney movie that is out there is based loosely on a Grimm's fairy tale. Okay?
Ah,
But if you were to take the Disney movie and compare it to the Grimm's fairy tale, you would find out that they left a lot of details, and it's a lot darker and a lot less happy than anything Disney ever put together. And our
and their stuff
history,
wasn't very happy either.
well, let me tell you,
Yeah.
and some of it's pretty bizarre when you read it, okay?
Okay.
But they did the same thing to our history,
Mm.
okay? They've Disneyfied our history, and they've forgotten our American government in it and made it all US government. I always said that one of the advantages of where I went to school as a child, and I went through Catholic schools, okay, was the fact that the Catholic schools couldn't get any funding from public sources at the time. So we had
Mm.
textbooks that were 30 or so years old, you know, and
Probably good for you.
and there you go. It was good for us because we learned some of the history that the people of my age in the public schools were not learning.
Right.
And I can remember comparing things with some of our friends, and they're like, "We didn't learn that." And I'm like, "Well, it's in our textbooks. Why isn't it in your textbooks?" But I remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
And and so, what we have to realize is that somewhere about, interestingly enough, in timelines, 1913, our American history was starting to be expunged from all
Mhm.
education, from the curriculums. It was being Disneyfied, and the details were being lost in all of that. And so, it's really in many ways, it's not our fault that we didn't know. It was being obfuscated or hidden from us, so that we don't figure it out. They liked it that way. Okay.
Mhm.
So, going forward, we were meant to have these two forms of government. And the reason is because we the people created the contract and created the construct of a state of state. Okay? So he who creates in the maxims of law, he who
Mhm.
creates owns. They have the superior thought, the superior jurisdiction to the other, to whatever it is that they created.
Right.
Our creator, that's who we answer to, right? The
That's
people.
right.
We answer to our creator. But the state of state was always meant to answer to us. We were the ones that were supposed to be the employers. Who's in charge here, right?
Right.
And and we are the ones that are supposed to be giving them our directives, our wishes. They're not supposed to be mandates handed down to us. They're not supposed to be statutes and codes and regulations. We were never meant to live under them. Okay?
Under the
So,
corporatocracy, because this is effectively we created the corporatocracy in an effort to be able to do business globally, really, right?
well, it was actually originally in its thought to begin with was to one was to facilitate trade,
Mhm.
two was to help us develop infrastructure, which is all in
Okay.
place now.
Uh-huh. Right.
We needed roads.
Right.
We needed utilities. We needed
Mhm.
water sources, reliable water sources. We needed docks and piers. We needed
Mhm.
defense of our borders. If you
So ports,
read
we needed ports, basically,
ports,
like
yeah, we needed
airports,
ports.
shipping ports. Yeah.
Well, back then, shipping ports, they hadn't imagined airports yet. But
Yeah,
but that's the same
yeah.
thing. That's still under, and we needed post roads and
Mhm.
post offices, because the post office was actually at the time controlled um, the um, by the UN, basically, or by the Pope. It's a papal organization, and so it's controlled by that. But it was contracted. They contracted the British to provide those services all over Europe, and and so the Brits were already providing those services in Europe, so that was included in our service package, known as the Constitution of the United States. Okay, that's where that came from, and so what we a lot of people don't realize is that our Constitution is actually a conduct or a contract. That's the other words for it. Okay. And in that contract, it enumerates the 18 services they were to provide. That was it. It was to facilitate the trade of goods and to assist in the roads and the infrastructure and the defense of our borders. Most of it is defense of our border. And so within all of those contracted services, um, that's that's where they slowly began to erode and get into our municipal, because in 1790, then there were the municipal contracts that were taken out under the constitution, another constitution that reads very much and very similar, but there are subtle differences in 1890 from the 18 uh, from the seven I'm sorry 1890 1790, from the 1789 and the 1787 constitutions. Okay.
Right, right,
1787 Constitution was our original that was finally settled after all of the Revolutionary War ended.
right. The
Okay.
federal constitution.
Correct. Federal,
Yeah.
but not meaning federal in the way that we see it today. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
For the federation, for the federation.
From the Federation, 1780, 1787. And then there was the federal government, which they named, went over into Scotland and named the United States of America with the little t. And that was the service provider. Because what a lot of people don't realize is back then, most of what was the colonies and the organization of colonies and assemblies had trading companies. So you had the East India Trading Company. You
Mhm.
had there were several different trading companies. Even Ben Franklin had a trading company that was named the United States Trading Company. Okay,
Mm. Mhm.
so that's what the constitutions were based on, and and our Declaration of Independence originally was really pulled from many different sources. All of the assemblies were trying to declare some measure of sovereignty or autonomy. And so that was Thomas Jefferson just took a bunch of them, pulled the best parts out, and made our
Declaration, yeah.
Declaration of Independence. And the same was from basically our Constitution was formed out of some of the trading contracts, the trading company contracts that were out there. So I also said that, our constitutions were named contracts, or another word
Mhm.
for them were contracts, but they were also called conducts because
Mm.
contained within them in it was the is the Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to Americans. It applies to anyone who is acting or an employee of the United States of America government, now incorporated. Okay.
Mm.
So the corporatocracy was who that Bill of Rights said, okay, here's your constraints, corporatocracy. The Bill of Rights is meant how you treat your employees. All right. It was sort of the union contract, if you want to think about it in that way. All right.
Mhm.
So when you go back through it, our founding fathers was trying to set up the parameters so that Americans were not taken advantage of, and they were not treated like slaves, and that they had the privileges, and then when they were not at work, had the rights of Americans. Okay.
Only the Americans fell under the Bill of Rights, not because Americans could work with
Right.
them and not, but we also had other foreigners who were residing here under the Residence Act, right?
Correct. Correct.
I just
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
people out there to know the difference between just because you're here doesn't make you an American. And that's the difference between Americans versus U.S. citizens
Right.
also,
Well,
even today.
well,
But I
we
think that oh, sorry.
that's all right. We have a document called the 1779, which
Mhm.
is known as our piece of documentation that that changes our political status back to American.
Right.
And the history of that document was in 1779, they were having a difficult time discerning who had a loyalty to the states and who was retaining their loyalty to their mother countries. Okay.
Mm,
So if you
yeah.
wanted to stay a British, an English citizen, an Englishman, or a Frenchman, or a Dane, or a Spaniard, you could do that. But if you wanted to declare that your loyalties and allegiances were only to the land of America, to your state, to your nation, then that's where the 1779 originated from, is from that declaration regarding who we were. And it allowed us to separate those out in terms of knowing who that Constitution then applied to later on and who it didn't. Okay? Who was
Mhm.
here just residing and who was domiciled, actually permanently on our states. Okay?
Yep.
So,
I think this is so important. Lots of folks, they think that we're just playing the word game, especially the way that the orthodoxy wants to present the, sovereign citizens, and they do the whole mirroring game. And
mhm,
so they think that we're playing a game, but actually these words have definitions and meanings.
that's right. And we in the two jurisdictions which the English have always operated in maritime. All of their maritime law, incidentally, comes from, the basis of trade route and
Right.
pirate trade. It is
Mm.
the language of pirates and parley. Um, Parley being agreement, okay, in the British language and in the language of trade, is to make an agreement. And so it's a contract, basically. It's contract law. So it's one of those things that as we've developed our country and those early developing days with our Declaration of Independence, the three constitutions, one for Americans, one for the state, basically the federal service provider, one for the municipal service providers, going in and organizing cities and townships within our states. That's how all of this kind of developed. But in that, they also began to make the plan on how to quietly take over our government and leave us behind in the dust. And that culminated during the Civil War. So, during the Civil War, it was so chaotic. You're right. They were burning books, they were burning records, they were burning down cities. They were going after principal sovereigns,
Mhm.
like Anna's husband, James Belcher, his family. They chased them to try to murder them, to cancel the sovereignty of our basis of our country. Because
This is
essentially
important
our
for people to
sovereignty.
know, Lisa. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is
Okay.
important for folks to hear and comprehend, because there are many people who don't really comprehend the authority with which Anna and James are able to stand. They
Mhm,
don't believe it. They don't think it's real because, the
mhm,
Orthodox, we didn't learn this in school.
mhm. Right,
But friends, I hope
and
you're
they're not
listening to
gonna.
this lesson. Huh?
Right, and they're not going to.
Right.
The
Because we
bell
were
share.
usurped. Because we were usurped, like Lisa is
Right,
explaining. So if they've usurped us, then why would they tell us, right?
right. So, Anna's husband, James Belcher, we call it here in the US, in the Americas, um, his family name was Belcher, and they were designated a sovereign family, and granted sovereignty in his family through William the Conqueror in England. And moving forward, they carried that sovereignty like any other sovereign that's out there.
Mhm.
However, they also migrated to the colonies. And when they migrated to the colonies, of course, originally they were British, and some of the Belshire family remained loyal to the British. But James Provenance, decided to lend their sovereignty along with a few other sovereign families because of the abuse and the usurpations of the English. They decided to lend their sovereign designation to this new forming nation called the United States. And that's where we were really negotiated into after the after the Revolutionary War and the Treaty of Paris. That was what was negotiated into. Basically, that treaty was that Americans would be forever designated sovereign. That's number one reason they want us.
Mhm.
They want to cancel that sovereignty. Number two, the other thing that was designated in that's so important, that we are the only people on the earth that have this quality, is the fact that we were given property rights. Property rights meaning not only over our bodies, okay, but over anything that we possess, including our land. We were given
And
property
name,
rights.
our
And our
name,
name,
our like
yes,
mhm.
everything, okay? We have property rights. And so those are the two things that they're really after. They've
Yeah.
taken all of our property,
Mhm.
and they've put it under the British title system to try to
Yes.
claim title to our land, which they have no right to, because we have our property rights.
Mhm.
But then what they did is, to protect that until they can try to get our sovereignty and our property rights canceled, they've moved those into state trusts. So now the state or the municipal governments are the ones that control that trust. Okay?
Mhm.
Claiming that basically we don't know what we're doing, we're infant, or we're decedents, meaning that we're dead. And that has to be held, um, because we're not capable of actually taking care of it. And
So,
so
may I
with
interrupt
the
right here?
go ahead.
So because this is important, this is part of the birth certificate scam. So what Lisa's saying, you guys, is this is important because this is the reason to declare. What you just said was the reason to declare. Because at the time of our birth, they created this birth certificate, which I'll let you get further into that, Lisa. But they gave us all a birth certificate and registered our births. And and that removed us. That was essentially our death certificate. We can explain, that's a little more complicated. But when we're saying that, when Anna is saying that it is important to declare, and people say, why should I declare? Like, I'm already sovereign under God. This is why it's important to declare, because they've actually violated us with paperwork.
Right. Right. When you look at a okay. So when you go back, and if you look at a live birth certificate, when you look at your live birth certificate, the one that's signed on the day of your birth from the doctor or the nurse or whatever, um, there is one date on it. It's the date you were born, right? It's a date and time. That's what's on it. But if you look at your birth certificate, your birth registration, that certificate has two dates on it. It has the day you were born, and it has the day you were registered. And that day that you were registered was the day you were made, your political status was changed from being an American and turned into basically a British territorial citizen. Without our knowledge, without our permission, without our parents, our mother or our father's even knowledge or explanation. So,
Unconscionably out of the cradle.
correct. And essentially anything we sign is a contract, right? So they made forced, more or less forced, you were not leaving that hospital back then unless your parent, one of your parents, your mother or your father, and by the way, parent is an interesting term. It goes back to meaning the pair that rents, okay? And one of them have to sign you out by signing that registration, all right? And they're not disclosed at any time that what they're doing is taking away your natural born political status and converting you over to being a British territorial citizen with only privileges, not the rights that you were supposed to be given as a naturally born American. Okay?
That's the fraud. And someone had asked Lisa, like, why the birth certificate mattered to show the crime. Well, it is evidence of the fraud that Lisa just explained.
Right? And in the maxims of law, fraud, when fraud is committed, it vitiates all contracts, what they call pro nunc tunc, from the very get-go, from the very beginning. Okay? And so with 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 being able to declare yourself as an American, you're taking yourself back and and saying, no, that contract is canceled. Okay? That contract was fraud. And therefore, I have no allegiance to that contract because it was done without full disclosure. Okay? So it's really important. Our 1779s are a really important piece. So is as you move through the paperwork, the deed of reconveyance, which is an expansion of that 1779. All of our 928s are. And that's based on Anna's article called 928 on annavonrights.com. And so each of those documents that are in that series that we call the 928s are an expansion and a definition of each of the concepts held and the sections held within the 1779. If you have never read your 1779 in real detail, then you need to go back and read it. And then go read some of the 928 documents, and you will comprehend that much better as to what that document is actually doing in detail. Okay?
It's actually will make you very emotional. For me, it brought tears to my eyes, all of it, because you're reclaiming everything from the conception of your, of your life through your parents. The way that it is described in like detail is incredible. Like, I think it really is sobering.
Yeah, very much so. And so, as we move through all of this, it's important. Here on Ohio, we have our recording secretaries, have our people who do their 1779. They have to read them. For many of them, it's the first time they've ever read it, and they're going through and they're thinking, with the United States and without the United States of America and without the United States of America territories. And they're going, what the heck is that all about? And what it is talking about the jurisdictions. It's talking about the various constitutions and who was perpetrating that against you. And so you're leaving those behind and you're tuning in to your new reestablished old identity, right? As an American, reclaiming all of your property rights, reclaiming, including your body, your name, everything that you own, and you're reclaiming your sovereignty in that way. Nobody else on this earth has that sovereignty other than the designated sovereigns of Europe. Okay? So,
This is really important, Lisa, because we know that Anna, the work that she's doing it in an effort to really help all living men and women around the globe. She's not trying to leave anyone out. And at the same time, this is why it's so important for Americans to wake up, for Americans to really just realize what's going on and and have an opportunity to choose.
Right. So what I'd like to do is go back to the concept of who Anna and James really are. because James, in his family's provenance, with them giving us, lending us their sovereignty from the very get go, he was only one of only a few who are still left on the Americas who could actually be the summoning authority to make the American government rise again. Okay, all these other groups that are out there, the constitutional people, let's have a constitutional convention. They're not people. They're British territorial citizens. They can't hold a constitutional convention.
The
They
one
don't have,
percenters, the half
they don't have
percenters. Yeah,
they don't have
all
the
these,
standing. They have no
they don't,
standing.
yeah. The
So,
provenance. So Lisa, talk about that, because listen, you've had all of these genealogy companies and stuff, and they're not really trying. They're this is the corporatocracy trying to track down the last of the sovereigns. This was a, you know, a pretty sinister uh,
mhm,
act that was done. Right? You want to tell them about that?
so
Because people,
you
because
know,
the reason I'm asking, Lisa, is because Disney and and Hollywood have made it, have said, like, it doesn't matter where you came from, it doesn't matter who your parents suck, and they keep trying to divide all the parents from the children. And what's very important for everyone to comprehend is our provenance, like knowing who you are and who you're from, is what gives you your authority in terms of, in the way of the ancient law.
right, right. So, within the sovereignty that comes through um, James, and of course, Anna has an ecclesiastical deed poll. That also makes her, and you don't want to do that. Okay. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't want to do that. Okay. Um, because it is fraught with pitfalls. Okay. Um, and and you have to have some sovereign connections to do it as well, which hers is James. Okay. And so with the sovereignty, we have been granted this grace and that summoning authority. There was only a few ways to actually bring our American government back. And one of those would have been summons by the President of the United States. That's the capital T, United States, not the whatever they call that guy in the White House right now.
The
Whatever you
corporatocracy,
whatever you want to call him right now. But anyhow,
the actors.
okay, that's the wrong jurisdiction because they're maritime. We're land. Okay? We're land. And so we would have to have the President of the United States summon us back in, but we didn't have one. We've been in what they consider an interregnum or in recess since the Civil War. Okay? So there wasn't one. So that option one's out. Option two is to have 9 states that are actually standing, meaning they have all 4 pillars of their governments operating. Okay? On the land. 9 states. All right? We don't have that yet either. So option 2's out. Option 3 is to have one of the sovereigns step up and summon the states back into assembly. And that's where James and Anna came in, was being able to wake us up, call us to be who we are. So one of my questions that I always ask people in webinars is, how do we get here? How do we get here? Why are you here? And most will say, I'm here because I know something's wrong. I'm here because um, it's that's not supposed to be our government. You know, that there's stuff going on over there that's just it's criminal. It's criminal. And I know that's not where I want to be. Okay. So my next question is what are you going to do about it? Because in in 1863, our American government, half of it walked out and the other half of it was replaced, and that's how they usurped our American government. And because communication was so bad and the war was so awful, and there was no real way to get the communication and the education out to the people, our side of the government was put to sleep. Okay?
You know what's funny about that, Lisa, is that we think we have a hard time reaching people in this day of communication right now. Like we feel like we have a hard time reaching the masses because we don't have access to the media that they control. But back then, you had to ride on a pony express. Like you had to get on a horse or something and get to somewhere and actually try to, you know, and it was word of mouth. And we all know how telephone works.
Right.
That
Right.
game doesn't work very well.
No, it doesn't. And the only other form that they had were what they called handbills. And those were printed up forms that they could take out. But in many times, they'd tack them to the trees, they'd tack them to whatever they could tack it to, buildings or porch posts and everything else. But, that was not necessarily an effective way of getting the information out to the masses. And then they began to kind of change the education. So things get lost into history. And the only way that we can get that back is to go ahead and, you know, um, through James's, I guess, intrepidation, his courage was to summon us back into. And so, but however, that doesn't make us a government.
Mhm.
What makes us a government, what makes us get our American government, are we the people and our voices and our votes and our directives back, is each and every one of us stepping up, volunteering, and learning, educating ourselves, but more than less, volunteering to get our government back into place. None of us know what we're doing to begin with. None of us. But if we're interested and if we're dedicated, we're going to get our governments back up. And that's what it takes. We have a saying on the Ohio Assembly, you're the one that you're waiting for. So what are you waiting for? Right?
That's a good one. Can you say anything about this statement right here, Lisa? If we were lent sovereignty, how do we get it extended back through a current sovereign?
So your sovereignty is it's about establishing the sovereign government. So when James lends his authority, he's lending it to a sovereign government. Okay? And in that sovereign government, we have already established the fact with our declaration, our unanimous Declaration of Independence, and our original Constitution of 1787, that we are sovereign. Okay? So it's a merely going back and making sure that we are an active government, and that we are in the activity of actually establishing those four um, elements of our government and making it run. It's up to us. You know, nobody is going to come save us. In fact, they've always said that how America goes is how the world goes. If America falls, the world falls. We're the
Yes, and
last vestige, we're the last vestiges of freedom and of
mhm.
sovereignty here in the world.
Our
And
nation
we
gives sovereignty to so many other nations around the world.
That's correct. That's correct. And we can and how we do that is because they've had fraud perpetrated against them too. And it's about waking them up and helping them claim their God-given rights because they are our creator's children too. And they've been given those rights, but they've been indoctrinated way longer than we have to actually lose them and think that they have to go by their government sanctions and regulations and
Mhm.
the laws of their country that are not laws. They're really not. Okay.
I
So,
think that I
for
think that that you did such an awesome job, Lisa. I think we've
oh,
been talking for a long time, and we know that Anna is resting and we need her
good.
to rest. She's been working really hard as this next attack goes on around the world, and we just want to praise her and thank her and James for everything that they do. And thank you, Lisa, for sharing your experience and knowledge and history as a daughter of the revolution. So, we're very fortunate to just even know you. And it's, friends out there, if you can find any of the sons or daughters of the revolution, like they're just the gems that we have all around. And I always love listening to your stories, Lisa, and I know that everybody here comes and enjoys listening to you as well. So
Oh, thank you.
thank you for sharing that with everybody. We really appreciate you.
So, if you haven't changed your status yet, we encourage you to go to the tasa.americanstatenationals.org. Go to the 50 state web type, the, 50 state tab on the website, and contact your state coordinator. They're going to help you get your paperwork done, point you in the right direction, and you know, get you moving.
Yep.
There
We
is
got the
only
links
one
here in the chat, you guys, too. Yep.
there is only one way for us to right what is going on, to stop the any kind of form of war that goes on against us or any other country. And that's for us to get involved and claim our sovereignty and make our directives to our employees. Okay? And we have to do that by getting our government set up. So get busy, people. Ohio is almost there. Almost. And one of these days we'll be able to talk about that online. So, we're trying to help. Ohio is trying to help our neighboring states as well as a couple of other states to so that they can stand along with us. So you stand with your state and then you stand with Ohio and the rest of the states that are standing.
Yes. And everybody who's asking about where to research, we put all the links here. Go to the TASA website. You can literally spend hours and days and weeks on that
Years.
website and years. Yeah. And I mean, Anna only has almost 5,000 articles. Start at the beginning and start right now. Actually, she would say start right now and then read backwards. Although for me, I really enjoyed reading the first, I'd say 25 articles. The first 25 articles to me were just so powerful, and it's her notices that she's giving to the Pope and to everybody, and it's like, pages and pages. Like one of them I think is 50 pages or 75 pages. It's a lot. But
Book.
yeah, they're literally books. Yes.
But also realize when you read the older articles on the website that many of the things have been researched and updated. So,
Yes.
before you make any, rash moves, make sure that you're contacting your state coordinator because many of those things have been updated, and the process has gotten much easier than it did when Anna first started writing articles, and
Yes.
and some of the things have changed as we have discovered more of our American history. So our understanding has changed. So we need to keep working towards that, keep researching, Go find yourself some old antique books, you know, recognize that the lowercase the United States, lowercase the United States of America is different from your American government. So when you're reading and you see states in lowercase, you want to make sure that you're reading about the land states, not not the paper states that are the contracts. Okay?
Right.
Okay.
And people are asking about what to do if you are in a foreign country. And if you are, how do you declare? So you can go to the global family group. So if one of my moderators here, if one of the moderators can please put that, I can't get my machine to give me the link fast enough. But let's share the global family group link as well. But every one of these episodes, friends, in the show notes after when we close out, in the show notes, there's the United States of America link tree, and it includes the global family group link tree. So just go there, and anyone who is not on America, click on that, and you can declare right there on the global family group.
Yeah, and it's really
Anyway,
important. It's really important that as you do that, that you're connecting, um, not only through that global family group for those of the that are not on America, but for those that are on the states, you want to make sure that you're connecting with your state assembly. That's where your power lies, is in together in numbers on your state. So, make sure that you're getting to that state assembly, and they're going to be able to provide you more information. You're going to have people that you can get information from, discussions with. So, make those connections, reach out and get that done.
yes.
Okay?
Thank you,
Yeah.
Lisa. Okay, and just for the record, everybody, Anna is so sorry. She said that there was an attack and that she needed to take care of that, and this was not intentional. She apologizes profusely, and she wasn't even sleeping. She wasn't even resting.
She was working. And she was doing important work. So we need to let her do her important work. And hopefully
Yes.
next week we'll see her back.
Yeah, she actually has been incredible. She's never missed an episode. Obviously we offer her grace, and I think that this was a really nice change, and we appreciate the education that we got with you, Lisa. Everybody is appreciating it, and I'm sure Anna will too. And we have to hold it down, right? We held it down.
That's right. We got it done.
Yeah, all of you guys bring your questions for Anna next week, and we shall see you on Tuesday. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.